Welcome everyone. I am quickly going to introduce you to your moderator for this session, and then I'll let the moderator take the session forward. Um, Welcome everyone to India Rivers 2022. Just a few quick things before I hand it over to the moderator. One is please put your questions in the Q&A box and your comments in the chat box. Keep the two separate. Please don't put your comments in the Q&A box. It really clutters the Q&A box. Keep your comments only to the chat box and questions in the Q&A box. Now I'm going to introduce you to your moderator for today. Welcome, Shibani. Shibani is a fellow with the Initiative on Climate, Energy and Environment, ICEE, at the Center for Policy Research and an advocate on record Supreme Court of India. She researches and writes on issues relating to environmental law, regulation, and governance. She also appears in environmental cases before the Supreme Court and the National Green Tribunal. She has authored several articles, chapters, and opinion pieces on environmental issues such as environment impact assessment, air pollution, and climate litigation. She has edited a volume titled Indian Environment Law, Key Concepts and Principles, which provides in-depth case law-based analysis of Indian environmental jurisprudence. Over to you, Shibani.
Thank you so much, Siddharth. And I welcome all the participants and attendees today on a Sunday morning. Thank you so much for joining us. And I also want to thank Shripad and Avli for giving me this opportunity to be part of this fantastic 2-day-long discussion and deliberation in the India Rivers Week 2022. So we begin today's proceedings with this 4th session in the program, which is on governance of Indian waterways. And we have a fantastic lineup of speakers with really rich experience on the issue who come to this issue from very different entry points. But before I introduce the speakers, I just thought I'll take a few moments because why I think inland waterways provides such a fantastic case study of how hard environmental governance is. I mean, environmental governance is hard across the board in India, but inland waterways in particular, for so many reasons, provides us a case study, but also really something to think about on how should we be governing our environment, our environmental resources, our natural resources. And I have a few reasons to think that. And I'm sure our speakers today will reflect on some of this. Primarily, how regulation interacts with people and science. And where does science fall in the whole science and social impacts? What place do they hold in policy making, in environmental policy making, in decision making in India, in legislative forums? Where does it all stand? And I think National Waterways provides a fantastic example to us that it actually doesn't form as important a place as it should. So evidence-based policymaking, science-based policymaking, social environmental impact assessment-based or policy that responds to that kind of evidence and assessment, and governance or institutions and regulatory framework which is designed around this kind of evidence, this kind of deliberation, this kind of robust processes is something that we've seen missing in action when it comes to national waterways, not only when the bill and the act came about, but just the way in which the national waterways are being developed. Many people in this forum have, of course, been working on this issue for several years, so I should really not speak too much about it. But I just thought I'd lay out this kind of a background, and I'm hoping today's session would kind of flesh out some of these points a little more for us, not only for us to understand the various aspects, but also to kind of perhaps give some of us who are researchers, workers, academics, advocates, to understand what the possible way forward is, because this is clearly an issue which is becoming bigger and bigger for us in days to come. So I'll now introduce our panelists for the day. First, Avli Verma. I think most of us here are well acquainted with Avli's and Manthan's work in this area. Avli is a researcher with Manthan Adhyayan Kendra, where she has been studying the development of inland waterways program in India for the past 5 years. Avli has done her MPhil in Planning and Development from IIT Bombay and an MSc in Environmental Sciences from JNU New Delhi. And Avli will be making the first kind of lead presentation and setting the stage for today's discussion, as it were. Followed by, we have really a star-studded panel, and I'll quickly introduce all of them so that we have a great flow once Avli's completed her presentation. First, we have Dr. Bharat Jhunjhunwala, former professor at IIM Bangalore, who lives in the banks of Alaknanda in Uttarakhand. Many of us know him. He's argued several cases before the Supreme Court, High Courts, and the National Green Tribunal. In fact, in one of his cases before the National Green Tribunal, he's challenged raised the issue of requirement of environment clearance for national waterways, National Waterway 1 in particular. And another case of his in the Supreme Court we know has kind of led to the stay of 24 hydroelectric power plants. Welcome, Dr. Bharat sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Second, we have, and we were discussing what we should call Ramanand sir. So we decided we'll call him Ram sir because it made so much sense given the Ramsar site that he works at. He's Ramanandji. He works with Indigenous Perspective Manipur. Today he'll be speaking on environmental governance gaps in Loktak Waterways Improvement Project. Also kind of underscoring the non-compliance of the Wetland Conservation and Management Rules of 2017, which were issued under the Environment Protection Act. And what are the real implications of this kind of non-compliance with regulation on the people who are dependent on Loktak and kind of their livelihoods. We'll then move on to Mr. Abhijit Prabhudesai. He's an environmental activist with the Federation of Rainbow Warriors. And I'll invite him to speak on nationalization of rivers in Goa under the National Waterways Act, and also about the Jetty Policy 2022, which has come out in Goa. Then we'll have Professor Sunil Chaudhary, who's a professor and former head at the University Department of Botany at the TMB University, and has been a member of the Bihar State Ganga Rejuvenation, Protection and Management Committee. Professor Chaudhary is known for his pioneering work in the field of river and wetland ecology, particularly looking at water pollution and monitoring, biodiversity conservation, with a focus on the highly endangered Gangetic River dolphins. He'll be today speaking to us about the legal and regulatory measures that are needed to be put in place to address the various issues, particularly the impact of waterways. And finally, we'll have Mr. Sharan, who has been the former Chief Secretary of the Government of Bihar. In fact, in 2017, as many of us know, Government of Bihar had raised significant concerns regarding the implementation of the National Waterways project, particularly on dredging and impacts of downstream of such waterways. And today, we'd like Mr. Sharan, if you kind of reflect on the issue, a very key issue in environmental governance, which is federalism, and kind of taking national waterways in Bihar as an example to look at center-state relationship on issues relating to environmental federalism. So can I invite you, Avli, to set the stage for today's session, please?
Thank you, Shivani. I'll just quickly share my screen. One second. Yeah. Hi. Good morning. My name is Avli Verma, and I'll be presenting on the environmental governance regime for the national waterways in India. It is a text-heavy and messy sort of a presentation, so I request you all to kindly pay attention to it and also bear with the text which is there. So we've discussed the environmental and social impacts, and the context for sort of this presentation is already set by Shivani in the introduction. But let me just say it again. The environmental and social impacts with regards to national inland waterways are very, very adverse, and they need attention in the sense that they're not even adequately addressed in the mainstream sort of narrative, which is around the national waterways. So national waterways, when they are pushed in a sort of revitalizing sort of a way, they are pushed with the claims that these are environment friendly, cost effective, and sustainable and safe mode of transport. But what we are finding with our monitoring and research of these waterways for the last at least 7 years is that there are several impacts and several environmental and social and new and emerging sort of impacts as well, which are not adequately addressed in this whole narrative. And we have actually discussed in detail all of these impacts in yesterday's sessions. But just to sum up, most of these are because of the dredging, which is mainly to maintain and to create the navigation channel. And it's a continuous process which is required for the navigation channel, which is to be there, which has to be there for the barges to move on. And the impacts are diverse, from turbidity to underwater noise to impacts on the riverine morphology, ecology, destruction of the aquatic habitats, effects on fish population, and impacts on the livelihood of fishermen. Moreover, the whole movement of barge on the rivers, it has even more serious impacts when these barges, when these sort of interventions come on the eco-sensitive regions and protected areas. And we'll hear more about it from the panelists also. But to quickly sum it up, there are also impacts and risks due to the emissions from the vessels, leakages, oil spills, and accidents that I'll cover in a bit. And also because of the construction of terminals on the floodplains, jetties for handling toxic cargo, and also impacts due to land acquisition, relocation of fishing sites, damages to the fishing nets, and impacts on the local livelihoods. But the key sort of interventions that we need to probably keep in mind for this presentation, and especially thinking about environment governance, and what I'll be covering in my presentation, is mainly because of capital dredging, which is the first sort of dredging which is done to create the navigation channel to provide an adequate depth in the fairway on which the barges can move. And also through the maintenance dredging, which is again because once the fairway is made through capital dredging, it's not as if that the way has been cleared for the waterways for the barges to move. This sort of route of the waterways has to be periodically and continuously sort of created and maintained, and that is done through maintenance dredging. And this is a very important activity, and we'll hear more about how mainly the environmental governance regime for around this maintenance dredging is being completely sort of intervened with, and the whole sort of exemption is taken by giving sort of misleading sort of claims. And also in some of the cases, for example, and it's not the case in the waterways of Ganga or Brahmaputra, but in cases such as the National Waterway 5 in Odisha, many of the barrages are to be constructed, which also will have problems of diversion of water and sediments, and will have impacts on the flow of water and in the riverine ecology. As well as terminals, river ports, etc. These will have impacts. Disposal of dredged material increasingly is something that we are seeing as a issue of concern, and also presence of wetlands and protected areas within the riverine stretches is something that we need to really pay attention to. So the main sort of tool with which we are looking, with which we were looking at the environmental governance regime is mainly through the EIA notification 2006, which provides a list or a schedule which lists all the activities which require prior environmental clearance before any activity or work is done for that project. So far, in the EIA notification 2006, and as it has been amended from time to time, the inland waterways are not included in the schedule. However, the entry 7E amended in 2009 includes ports, harbors, breakwaters, and dredging. And this is very important because this mainly covers the important components of inland waterways. And it also very specifically mentions this condition that maintenance dredging aspect of the waterways are exempt only provided it formed part of the original proposal for which the environment management plan is prepared and for which environment clearance is obtained. So waterways, or at least part of them, the components of the waterways, will have to seek environment clearance because they involve dredging and construction of river ports and terminals. This is a screenshot that I took in the morning only, and it shows that mainly you can see there were so many of the projects of Inland Waterways Authority of India for the development of waterways. For example, this National Waterway 4, the Waterways of Goa, National Waterway 5, which actually went and got the TUR from the Ministry of Environment for prior environment clearance. But this whole process was kind of stalled when this project of Jalmarg Vikas project was speeded up in 2017. So they had to have this clearance from the Ministry of Environment when the Jalmarg Vikas project was taken to the Public Investment Board, and they wanted the clarification whether environment clearance is required or not for this project. And Ministry of Shipping mainly argued in the meeting, and these are the sort of arguments we have gotten from the documents we access through RTI, that mainly they said that environment clearance is not required for the Jalmarg Vikas project, and it is mainly because navigation channel is already in existence for National Waterway 1. So therefore, it is not a case of creation and developing a new navigation channel. But the fact that they would be transporting barges of capacity which is enhanced, and they will also be increasing the capacity of the National Waterway 1 is something which was missing from this argument. They also provided exemption which are listed in the in the EIA notification, which is dated 15th January 2016, which mainly list dredging, desilting of dams, reservoirs, weirs, barrages, and canals for the purpose of maintenance, upkeep, and disaster. And this does not mention navigation aspect at all. And they listed this as an argument to say that the environment clearance is not required. The other thing that they quoted were the provisions from the sand mining guidelines to seek exemption for the maintenance dredging for the purpose of navigation. But this letter here from Ministry of Shipping is very important, and I've made it a point that I don't take quotes from this and put this letter in itself for you, so that this is clear that even Ministry of Shipping in 2017, in March of 2017, it was very clear that the arguments that the Ministry of Shipping have provided, they are mainly in context of mining of minor minerals, and they have reiterated the sort of condition that maintenance dredging is exempt, provided it forms the part of original proposal. So that condition is also, they have very clearly listed. And in 2017, they very clearly stated that the instant proposal, which is the proposal of Jalmarg Vikas project, it involves dredging, it requires environment clearance, prior environment clearance. And this was conveyed to the Ministry of Shipping. The other sort of thing which was quoted by Ministry of Shipping is that maintenance dredging aspect has negligible impacts. But when we go back and look into the aspects which created this condition in the EIA notification itself, which was amended in 2009. And even when it was discussed for this case where coal was transported through National Waterway 1 between Farakka and Haldia. So even then they maintained, and it was noted in the expert appraisal committee minutes, that dredging, even if in some stretches and limited in frequency, involves removal of 50 centimeter to 1 meter of river bottom, and it causes disturbance of the river bottom. The whole sort of issue was taken to expert committee. Ministry of Environment mainly constituted an expert committee mainly to look into this Inland Waterways project, the project of Jalmarg Vikas project, and they have said it so beautifully in their recommendation that it is in the interest of this project and its sustenance for longer duration with environmental and social viability of this project that the inland waterways must be included in the EIA notification 2006, and these be appraised as category A projects, which are the projects with utmost scrutiny. And this is with specific issues addressing the river as living entity, changing hydrology, riparian rights, transboundary impacts, protection of banks and floodplain zones of the river systems. I think it's a beautiful sort of a recommendation which was given by the expert committee, but unfortunately till now, this is something which is completely overlooked. In October 2017, this sort of whole issue was in a way dominated by a meeting which was chaired by high-level ministers from Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, Ministry of Shipping, Ministry of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Rejuvenation. And it recorded in its conclusion that no environment clearance is required for inland waterways. But I think the point which should be given more attention is that the only time when the views of the Ministry of Environment was taken into account in this meeting, the secretary of the ministry said that the project should apply for environment clearance and the application can be fast-tracked if required. Unfortunately, in December 2017, however, the Ministry of Environment gave in and provided exemption only to the maintenance dredging aspect from prior environment clearance for all inland waterways projects. There is similar sort of conflict which sort of took place between Ministry of Law and Justice, Ministry of Shipping and Ministry of Environment, where again the Ministry of Environment said that the terminal is part of the port and it requires environment clearance, but the Ministry of Shipping again held that it doesn't require environment clearance, and it was again bypassed. I can maybe share links of some of the articles that we have written in this regard, and you can read more on it if interested. But for the sake of brevity, what I wanted to highlight is that even though only one part, which is the maintenance dredging part, is sort of exempted from the Office Memorandum of Ministry of Environment, which is dated 21st December 2017, the Jalmarg Vikas project implementation status, and you can read it like from January 2020 till September 22, it has been writing that Ministry of Environment has confirmed that all inland waterways projects with their terminals, jetties are not covered under the EIA notification. If we talk about this whole case, and I think Bharat Jhunjhunwala would be a better person to maybe explain it, but just for the context here, I'll mention that this case was sort of heard in the National Green Tribunal since 2015 till 2022, and in May 2022 the case was disposed, while the consultations which the National Green Tribunal sort of recommended that Ministry of Environment starts again, they were not even submitted to the tribunal. The case was postponed around 14 times in between 2020 to 2022. And the expert consultations, which again, the National Green Tribunal suggested that be done for this, were not even put on account. I don't think they were even conducted. And if you look at the draft EIA of 2020, draft EIA notification of 2020, we see that all inland waterways projects are put in category B2 projects. And if this draft is finalized in its present sort of form, then these projects will not even require the EIA. They will not require any sort of appraiser, and they will not even require any sort of public hearing. It's important that even though maintenance dredging part is exempt, capital dredging still requires prior environment clearance. And this is a recent tender on the website of Inland Waterways Authority of India, and it clearly mentions a project for capital dredging for National Waterway 3. And even though it's for a very small stretch, but no sort of permission so far has been acquired or has been put in the public domain by IWAI regarding the capital dredging which has been taking place in National Waterway 3. And we can see it in the annual report. And it's very interesting to note that the sort of reasons which are given for experiencing delay on the part of capital dredging and widening of narrow sections in National Waterway 3. It's a sort of same section for which the tender is provided here. But you can note here that It is because of the local issues related to disposal of dredged material, demand for extra bank protection, dredge spoil, frequent stoppage of works and litigations by the local people, and objection by the fishermen. It is because of this, the report said that the progress of capital dredging is being stalled. But it's also important that all these impacts are being faced by the local people and fishermen. It's also interesting to note that even though this whole project is called environment friendly, the sort of reasons which are given for the delay of many of these activities are actually environmental concerns. So for example, this mainly says that with new regulations regarding protection of wetlands, identifying disposal sites for material dredged from national waterway has become extremely difficult. Again, the long run process for allotting public dumping sites is causing considerable underutilization of the dredging capacity of National Waterway 3, and it's recorded in the annual report. This is just to give an example. If a waterway project is under the EC sort of regime, what kind of conditions are provided? And this is from the Kochi Water Metro, which overlaps part of the National Waterway 3, and where the similar sort of activities are taking place. And it's important to note that all these sort of conditions are put in place, and these are legally binding if the whole process is taken for environment clearance process. And it also requires an independent monitoring, which needs to be carried out by government agency or institute while this dredging activity is carried out. So this clearly reflects that this requires legally binding sort of safeguards. This is just to give you an example of the issues which are now emerging because of the various accidents which are taking place on the national waterways. And this is very important because these are the accidents, all these sort of marks are the accidents where barges have capsized, and these barges are full of fly ash, like 1,000 to 1,200 tons of fly ash laden barges have capsized in the vicinity of the Sundarban on the Indo-Bangladesh protocol route. And this whole thing was taken to the National Green Tribunal by Dakshin Banga Matsyajeevi Forum. And the sort of play of jurisdiction that we are seeing in the orders is very concerning. So if you can see, it's very clearly sort of said that both Inland Waterways Authority of India and the Kolkata Port Trust are sort of in a way fighting with regards to the areas in which the barges have sunk. And they're both denying that it's not their territory. Similar sort of, if you can read, this is a latest order in this case, October 22. And here also the irrigation department is being sort of reprimanded by the NGT for not disclosing the jurisdiction of its sort of work. And it's very interesting to note that the tribunal is saying that while filing his affidavit, they're trying to withhold the information. And they're expecting the tribunal to actually come up with under whose jurisdiction these barges are sinking. It's also important to note here the committee which was sort of set up to actually understand and to investigate the manner in which and the extent to which this sort of damage has been done with the fly ash which is sunk in the river. It's important to see even the committee's sort of recommendations are not fully sort of at par with the with regards to the negligence which is sort of provided in this sort of Yeah, so if you can see, the committee has not been able to determine or disclose the quantity of fly ash, which is, and the high-speed diesel, which is recovered by the Inland Waterways Authority of India. And this is with regards to the recent sort of accident which has taken place in November 2021 in the same area. They've also not been able to devise a methodology to assess the environmental damage due to the fly ash deposition in saline and brackish water like the rivers of the Sundarban. So these are very important sort of remarks which are made in the order of the NGT, which show that we have no mechanism so far to even assess the extent of damage that these sort of accidents are bringing in the rivers and the riverine ecology. Again, this is the recent order where they have mainly accepted that the standard operating procedure with regards to prevention of accidents on the inland waterways are yet not placed before before the tribunal, and it was because they're not approved by the competent authority so far. And it's a recent order, it's just 10 days ago. Similar sort of absence of important sort of mechanisms or guidelines for the determination of environmental compensation for the damage caused to the environment is also not in place as yet. I think I'll just stop here, and we'll hear more from the panelists, I think, on these sort of issues. But and this case, again, is something which is ongoing. So we don't know the whole extent of where it will lead us. But I just wanted to highlight some of the important issues which are emerging with regards to environmental governance. And these are just some of the issues we have not touched upon. Maybe the impacts because of the underwater noise and the experiments or sort of assessments needed for light pollution, which is also coming up. And we touched upon that aspect, I think, in the sessions yesterday. So I'm not going to repeat them, but I'm looking forward to the discussion that we have after the panel.
There was a lot of ground to cover, and I think your presentation really did a fantastic job of kind of laying out the key issues, and there's so many, and highlighting some of the government documents and what various government agencies really think and write about on these issues. So we'll start with the panel discussion for today. I'll request all the panelists to keep to about 10 minutes, if that's okay. While we are closing to the 10 minutes mark, I'll send a quick chat message on your private Zoom window. So just kind of an indicator to wrap up, if that's okay. And then we'll take on questions and comments at the end of the panel discussion. So I think Dr. Bharat Jhunjhunwala, I think we should, your kind of view on this kind of logically flows from where Avli ended. If we could invite you now to kind of raise your point.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Clear. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Shivani. First of all, I couldn't recognize you when I saw you first. I don't know. Let me share with everyone that Shivani was the lawyer who argued this matter before the NGT. So she's totally in the right position to moderate this session. So thank you, Shivani, for connecting again. See, I have one comment to make, that by calling this session governance of waterways, we are actually accepting the waterway. I don't think we should do that. I think the session, I would like to rename it something like existence of waterways or something of that type, because I don't think the issues are of governance. The issues are really of existence of waterway itself. Now, I am not familiar with other waterways, but I will share 2-3 very fundamental points. You see, the length of waterway from Haldia to Varanasi, if they may plus a few hundred kilometers plus minus. As I understand, the length by waterway is about 1,600 kilometers, and the length by road or rail is about 1,200 or 1,100 kilometers, something of that type. Now, the waterways up to Varanasi is simply not viable economically, simply not viable. Because if you look at the documents of how they have justified this waterway, they say that the cost of transport per kilometer ton is less by waterway than by rail. True, maybe true, not true, but maybe true. But the kilometers that you have to cover is about 1.5 times. So if you save 25 paisa on the reduced cost because of waterway versus rail, you lose 1 rupee because of the higher distance that you have to cover. And I was able to pursue this with the IWAI till about a year ago, and I could not find any data of movement of barges from Varanasi to Haldia. Whatever movement was taking place was downstream of Farakka to Haldia. That is my general impression. I have gotten involved in other activities. I could not pursue it. So first thing is that as far as NW1 is concerned, I just don't think it is going to work at all, no matter how much money. I had a discussion with Murli Manohar Joshi, and the original idea of NW1 was proposed when he was in the ministry, in some ministry, and he said that he had told Vajpayee that this is not going to work. So there is a whole history of the economy. Also, if I'm sharing this because I think there is a need for us to raise the economics issue before the Public Investment Board, which is continuously allowing IWAI to spend public money. We should bring in this whole question of viability. The second major difference, see, the waterway project is really a fad. Modi or XYZ must have gone to Europe. They must have seen water barges moving on the Rhine or the Mississippi, and they say, oh, yes, that's what we need to do in India too. That's all. They totally forgot that Ganga is the river which has the highest sediment load in all the major rivers of the world. And already we have a huge problem with Farakka, because the slowing down of the velocity at Farakka is leading to huge sedimentation upstream, which Avli mentioned that the government of Bihar was raising earlier. So the second point is that dredging of Ganga for waterways, in my assessment, doesn't work, because the amount of sediment that is flowing in and that will need to be removed for the barges to move is simply exorbitant. I got the balance sheet of IWI, but I lost the energy I could not get them to give me the segregation of their balance sheet of NW1. So what I had was the IWI balance sheet, but there was no information how much of the money was going sinking into NW1. So we could not make a cost-benefit analysis of NW1. So what is needed is a more detailed economic analysis, I think, of the project. And I think it's a fit case if we can get together a team to take it before the Supreme Court under Article 32 or something, saying that the government is wasting public money for fads. I mean, I think it may get into Supreme Court at that level also. We should try that. I will not go into the legal aspect, just to mention that I filed this case originally in 2014 or 2015 when Shibani was the advocate. And for the third time, NGT has disposed of earlier this year. And we are now going into the appeal for the third time to the Supreme Court. This is the third appeal on the same case to the Supreme Court. And I don't want to get into the legal niceties. The only other point I would like to make, Shivani, how much time do I have?
You have 5 more minutes.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So the role of government of Bihar could be pivotal in this whole matter. Nitish Kumar is on record that Waterways is leading to floods. He is on record that Farakka is leading to floods. And the whole matter is intertwined with Farakka. What happens is that because of Farakka, because of the pond that is made behind Farakka, the slowing down of the velocity of water is leading to higher sedimentation. I believe this is happening now up to Buxar. I don't have any concrete information, but my anecdotal information is that you are having sedimentation right up to Buxar. And so the entire Bihar, from almost Varanasi to Farakka, that's the entire area of Bihar where Ganga is moving. And that entire area is already flood prone and it will continue to become flood prone. The flip side is that because of the Tehri and other water abstraction, the flood are getting reduced. No, but the interesting point is that, you see, I don't know how much everyone is familiar. As I have understood, floods are essential to keep the waterway going. What happens in Ganga is that even before Farakka, let's forget Farakka, even before Farakka, the sediments continue to deposit throughout the year. Now, once in 5 years, 6 years, 4 years, when there is a huge flood, heavy flood, that is the time when the sediments were getting pushed down to the sea. And that was cleaning up the Ganga waterbed. Now, after Farakka and after water harvesting structures, two things have happened. The sediment load has not reduced entirely because the sediments that is coming from Alaknanda, that continues to flow. The water that is removed, that does remove some sediment, but some sediment still continues. So on the one side, we have reduced deposition of sediments. On the other side, we have reduced flushing of sediments because of the lower velocity. So between these two factors, what is the net result? Anecdotal evidence seems to say very clearly that floods are increasing. Flood havoc in Bihar is increasing. And as I said, it is happening now up to Buxar. So this is another aspect that we need to focus, because with this kind of sedimentation, it is waterways above Farakka is simply unviable. It is not going to work. The government can spend as much money it wants, but it will not work. The other only aspect I would like to mention is that there is a Bangladesh element to hold this waterway, which is again intertwined with Farakka. You see, in Farakka, what is happening is that the water going to Padma, which goes to Bangladesh, is flushed from the bottom of the gates at Farakka. And the water that goes to Hooghly is taken up from the upper part of the pond behind Farakka. As a result, and the agreement between Bangladesh and India is on the amount of water. It does not say anything about the amount of sediment. So what is happening is that relatively sediment-free water is going into Hooghly, and relatively sediment-high water is going into Bangladesh. Now, because the sediment load is high in Bangladesh, therefore Bangladesh is coming into increasing deposition, rising of riverbed and floods. And because you have no floods, I hope I'm not getting too technical, but I think these are the issues that I would like to bring in. See, what I understand is that the jwar bhata, the jwar, when the high tide, the speed of the high tide is greater than the speed of the low tide. And so what is happening is that High tide normally brings more sediments into the inland, inner part of the Ganga, and lower tide does not take back all of it. Some deposition continues. Now, this accumulation of deposit over a period of years again used to get flushed during the high floods. Now that you have killed not only because of the water abstraction upstream, but also because of diversion from Farakka. So if you, Kalyan Rudra had made very beautiful slides where he showed that the expenditure of dredging by the Kolkata Port Trust and the Haldia Port Trust, or whatever it is, has been increasing exponentially. Because what is happening is that the high tide is bringing more sediments. The low tide is, the high tide speed and its nature remains as it was. It is bringing the same amount of sediments that it was doing before Farakka. But after Farakka, you are not giving enough water for the sediment to be flushed out. So my sense is that the whole Farakka and inland waterways, I'm talking about NW1, how much these issues are, I think these would be applicable as much to Brahmaputra because that is also high sediment load. It may not be applicable to other rivers which may have lower sediment load, that is to be studied. But the problem with NW1 is that the sediment dynamics has simply not been taken into account. Now, we have been fighting on the technical issue of the applicability of EIA notification. Avli has done a beautiful job of explaining it. I don't want to repeat that. But I think I would encourage, I would welcome. Look, I'm getting tired. I mean, please bear with me. I have so many ideas that we could create a petition in the Supreme Court on this whole economics, whole EIA, not EIA, economics, economic viability, the flood control. And another very interesting aspect of this, which I think we should raise, is that because of the lower sediment coming from Farakka, our land is getting eroded. If you go to Ganga Sagar, last time I studied about 3 years ago, we were losing about 1 kilometer of land or something like that every year to the sea. Because again, the high tide was cutting to the coast, and the low tide was not bringing enough sediments to compensate for the, jisko bolte hain samudra ki bhook hai, the hunger of the sea for sediments. So I would say that we really need to put our heads together, work out these larger issues, and hit at Farakka and waterways with one arrow killing 2 birds. And I am happy. I'm really beseeching all the participants that let us get our heads together and do something on this larger issue. These technical antics of NGT and Supreme Court will continue. We may succeed, we may fail, but the larger issue will remain, and we need to do something about it. Shivani, I think I have finished, and it's within my time. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. A lot to think about, and you started off by making us all think about using the word governance, which I think really set the tone of, while we were listening to you, what is it that we should really focus on while we're talking about these national waterways, what aspect? And you stressed on the economic aspect of it, but also later on more kind of the technical sedimentation and what's happening on the ground. I invite Ramananji to talk about Loktak Waterways project and kind of looking at the wetland conservation rules of 2017.
Yeah, thank you, the Manthan for this opportunity. I was wondering what is a lake, a wetland doing among the rivers here, because I think a lot of discussions will be about rivers, and that's what I understand. But Just that there is the Ministry of Shipping that sanctioned some, in a small amount, 25 something crore for the Loktak inland waterways. So that's how I am here. We have been challenging this in the court, and I'll come to that later. But we have also been building our arguments against this project. Waterways, as we understand, has been always there for the fishing villages. So Loktak is about 236 square kilometers. There are many villages around. There are islands inside, and there's also a floating village inside the lake. So everything depends on canoes. Everything depends on the waterways they use. Waterways to reach to the land. Waterways for catching fish. And there's a system that is there, which is understood inside the lake and understood by the fishing, individuals, families. So the debates about when we talk about waterways, the debates is about huge machines, huge vessels, or motorboats coming into a system like this, and it has been there for some time now because at least one of the island. Karang Island is connected by a motorboat, and there are small activities like by some people in the lake. It just at the periphery in one of the islands using motorboats, and even that has been a discussion whether to allow, whether this will be a problem, and for the larger interests of the lake as well as for the fishing community. And also, it has been also before this Minister of Shipping came into the picture, the major problem confronting the fishing villages is with the state, the Loktak Development Authority, trying to stop the activities of the fishing community. And way back in 2011, November and December, they use machines, the big JCB they call the Watermaster, which came floating and destroying the floating huts. So there has been a confrontation, not just about the state, but also the machines that are being used. And in 2019, November, the Minister of Shipping sanctioned these. Suddenly in the press, the PIB came out with a press note saying that this amount has been sanctioned, and 9 villages around and one of the islands will be connected by this inland waterway by motorboats. And we were taken really by surprise because we didn't know about anything about this. And when we saw this, we said, we want to have a look at it, details of it. In fact, there was no detail at all. There was, forget about EIA, and we were just, Abli was talking about that. There was no study at all, except for some economic viability thing that, a page kind of thing, which doesn't really make sense at all. We looked at it, it doesn't really make economic sense also, doesn't make distance sense also. But without going into that, much of the money was to be about dredging. And dredging came into the picture in today's discussion already. Out of this 25 something crore, almost 15 will go into dredging. And in fact, they seem to have already bought the machine, which they can't use it at the moment because of the court case. So dredging for the leg bed to connect these villages. And some of the reasons that we have, we have had several discussions around this. Why the fishing? We're talking about, when it went about fishing and the villages, we're talking about particularly a union, the fishing union. We have a big union that looks into this matter, the All Loktak Lake Areas Fishers Union, and some of the concerns that we have raised with the government and also submitted to the court is that the fishing nets will be destroyed. The fishing nets are the one which is going to be really affected by these motorboats, and the birds the birds, this is really a bird season now also, and then birds coming from different parts of the world, and this is one of the major bird route. And birds will be definitely affected by the noise, by the oil from the motorboats. These are some, and then fish, including the fish, which is important for the fishing community. Quietly fishing in the lake, with the nets is important. But when motorboats come into this picture, the fish breeding sites or fish hatching sites, the fishing areas will be destroyed by this motorboats. So we raised this issue. For the boats, for the canoes that the people use, this technology is accessible to both men, but women, even boys, girls, young people. It's easy. You can actually acquire it easily. It's like 40, 50,000 rupees. You can own one. In fact, each family has boats, 2, 3, 4 boats. And that this everybody in that mobility is very free with this. Whereas the motorboats is something that you cannot own, it's very costly. Nobody has access to it, and then you cannot have control over it. So the issue of, like, for example, I was talking about 2011, the machine domination, the big machine domination in a place like Loktak, in a place like a wetland like this, is a big concern, because they have seen their houses being destroyed by these big machines. And in fact, seeing these boats or talking about boats being introduced in Loktak is seen as a threat, because their technology, the boats are not only about adapting a technology which is already adapted to the lake system, not only for the people, but for the birds, for the aquatic system, but that this motorboats they're talking about will have destructive forces to people, to fish, to the birds, to the aquatic system. So these are some of the arguments that we have raised with the government. We have also written it to the MOEF on this, that we are pretty much against the idea of this motorboat or waterways that's going to be introduced. Though the project has been sanctioned, then we went to the court. We went to the court not only for the purpose of, or not only for this, for waterways, but also the government wanted to start an ecotourism project. So we went we went to the court 2000. There's a standing, this is in 2017, the PL 24 2017. This is and then again in 2019 we are arguing. In fact, this is a very crucial time. The last hearing was on the 18th of this month, where the government have started submitting papers, documents, trying to ensure that this project goes through. In fact, in 2019, Tushar Mehta came and he kind of overturned a court order, which then allowed, almost allowed the project. Then we again went back to the court. This is in the Manipur High Court, not in the Supreme Court or NGT. But we have been able to overturn the Tushar Mehta argument, and mentioning about the existing law, which is the National Wetlands Rules of 2017. But in fact, the local law, which is the Loktak Protection Act of 2006, there is an existing law of the state, which says that there are no human activity. You cannot have human activity in the core zone of the wetlands, of this Loktak wetland. Though we have serious problem with this no human activity, clause in the act. We say, because there are people there, fishing activity will not be allowed. We are against it. But we say that the wise use idea, or the lake management plan that they have drafted now, needs, all these projects needs to be looked via these National Wetlands Rules of 2017. And of course, this is a Ramsar site, but Ramsar principle has to be brought into the understanding of any project that they want to take up. Currently, the state really doesn't believe in any of these. They don't want to do any study as far as we can understand. They don't want to go through any rigorous check of their activities or any of their project proposals. This is a big problem for us, in the sense that when we scrutinize these projects, in fact, these project details, these projects do not have any detailed study for the dredging activity, or what are the impact on the fishing, impact in any of that. They have no study at all. So and court was the only way we could actually ask for. And court has been kind till now, as far as I can see, that they have stopped any projects without the permission of the court, and without preparing what is known as the wise use plan, as is mandatory, and the lake management plan. And 2018, they have started submitting documents asking for allowing the projects to go through. Their argument, I think, is simple, straightforward, that it is for the economy, for the lake development, lake economy. You need these activities to be done. But then I don't know about what Avli was talking about for the river dredging. For the lake dredging, I think similar understanding has to be applied. Whether though there was no study at all, whether there's a requirement to do an EIA for the dredging, lake dredging, for the waterways, for paving that way. So that is something that needs understanding. I mean, I'll need feedback for that, because right now the next hearing is happening on the 8th of December. And we're expecting the courts, the government to submit all their documents. So I think that's where things stand. But recently Sarvanan Sonowal, I think he's the Union Minister of Shipping. He himself came and inspected. We then wrote a letter to him also saying that this is a very sensitive case of a Ramsar site, of a lake. And that you need to go slow on this, and you have to understand our perspective, the local perspective, the perspective of the fishing community, and I think that's where I will end.
Thank you so much, Ramananji, and I'm sure there'll be more questions and discussions. But I think what came out very clearly in your presentation is something I'd mentioned in my initial remarks, is just that this lack of evidence, or lack of, like what you said, were documents on the basis of which these decisions are being taken, or the state is acting. Either there isn't any evidence, or at least certainly not evidence that we have access to. So we don't know on why or what basis have they decided that machines should be brought in, or any of these actions should actually be initiated. And it's really good to see that you're using several routes, whether it's talking to politicians or through courts or through just advocacy, to kind of address and question some of these actions by the state. So we'll now move on to Mr. Abhijit Prabhudesai, and I'll invite him now to kind of speak about from the Goa perspective, please.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me, Shivani.
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great honor to be on this national panel. I must admit, our work is mostly limited to within the state of Goa. Of course, we work a bit outside neighboring areas of Karnataka and Maharashtra. But I must start with sharing our own experiences in Goa, I think, and I hope that I'll be able to connect these to more general issues that would be useful to everybody here. In Goa, I'm sure all of you are aware, it's a strip of land about like 70 kilometers wide and 100 kilometers long, with the Western Ghats on the east and the Arabian coast on the west. Now, Goa has got this amazing history of the Khazan lands. So if you see historically, you have the Western Ghat hills and slopes, and then you have the salt water. That's it. But the local indigenous communities about 3,000 to 4,000 years ago or earlier have what they have done is they have actually a lot of the land it's like wetlands, all of it was wetlands. But what they have done is they have constructed thousands of kilometers of bunds made out of local clay, which is collected. And these existing 11 rivers of Goa are all created by the indigenous communities. The rest of the wetlands have been taken up for economic use, but in an amazing manner where, the biodiversity is not touched. So what you have is the bunds which actually define the river. Those are the primary bunds and made out of clay. And the rest of the wetlands have been used using unique sluice gates, which operate automatically with the tide and allow the salt water to enter into areas within. And the rest of the land is used for paddy cultivation in a large way, which is unique varieties of paddy that are salt resistant and can easily be converted for fisheries or given back to the river anytime without any hassle. Now, this is like almost 200 square kilometers of land. That's like probably the most amazing thing in Goa, where you can see the community knowledge and understanding of the environment and a system that has worked amazingly for thousands of years. Where they say that one scientist has said that the bunds that were constructed are equal in terms of labor as constructing 9 times the biggest pyramid in Egypt. So that's the kind of work that's gone in. And the amazing abundance is known to all of us in Goa, maybe not the present generation, but the earlier ones. And we are witness to, just the tide bringing in fish, a child having to just go and pick up the fish from the fields, and brilliant diversity of shellfish. I mean, all the mud flats in the rivers, abundance of shellfish ranging from window pane oysters to everything else. So amazing abundance given by the rivers, and that's what has given Goa its character. The biggest thing that has been given by the rivers is this sense of community ownership. So we have the Gaonkaris of Goa, which are unlike the rest of India, where the colonial laws destroyed all, community ownership. These are commons of the local communities, but which were codified by the Portuguese and therefore had a legal status. And you can see all the maps even today used by the Goa government show half of the river with one village as a part of the panchayat area of a village, and the other half is a part of the other one, which is from the old Gaonkari maps. So our struggle is more fundamental here. We are saying that the rivers belong to the local communities, and that's where I think things can be corrected, because this is all legacy of the British colonial eminent domain that has led to these recent extremely colonial and unconstitutional laws. The Inland Waterways Authority Act has got some crazy sections where the Inland Waterways Authority can evict people, which is completely against our constitution. So similarly, our struggle as we believe has led to the Major Ports Authority Act coming in, because they want to take over our rivers and our Khazan lands. So, the most important thing I'd like to stress here is that the community knowledge and, of course, the environmental aspects of it and the social economic aspects all have to be mapped and have to be documented. This is our first role in whether you want to fight it legally or on the ground. This has to be documented, but along with also reclaiming community ownership, reclaiming these as commons, which will be governed and decided upon by the locals. So this is the way forward. of course, we are fighting on all the environmental fronts. So this whole thing opened up in January 2016 when Nitin Gadkari came to Goa and announced that the Vasco Bay, where the Suwari River enters the Arabian Sea, would be dredged from 14 to 19 meters to allow Cape-sized vessels to come in with huge amounts of coal and to the Mormugao port. And the fishermen met us and we went to the NGT, and we found that they had got a MOEF circular saying that no public hearings are required for any of the projects related to MPT and, this expansion or whatever. That was thrown out by the NGT, and the capital dredging was stopped, and there was a huge fine imposed. And so we succeeded at that first step, but that led to us having to study the matter. And then we discovered that our rivers have already been gifted by the Goa government to the Inland Waterways Authority with a one-liner without anybody knowing, and allowing 6 of our rivers to be included in the National Waterways schedule to the Act 2016. And therefore, we then dug out the Sagarmala reports, and I'll just show you some pages which are scary. This is a report done by AECOM, which is a master plan for Mormugao Port. And it says that there are huge steel plants and power plants, 75 megawatt steel building capacity and 20 gigawatt power building capacity. This is from their report, and which means that they need, and all the coal for these would be transported through Goa, which means that they want to transport 137 million tons of coal through Goa. Now, MPT, after taking over all the surrounding beaches and displacing all the neighboring fishermen communities, would still be able to handle only 50 million. The remaining 80 million would be transported through our rivers, which was the craziest idea, we thought, but we understand it's connected to Adani's Australian, ventures. And so we went to all the villages, and the response has been amazing. I think it's very important for us to understand that the fight has to be at the grassroots by empowering and, organizing local communities to reclaim their rights. And therefore, we have got more than 110 odd panchayats out of the 190 panchayats in Goa to pass resolutions rejecting the inclusion of our 6 rivers. So on ground, this whole thing is illegal. And the government is aware of it. We subsequently, after stopping the capital dredging, we stopped all the MPT berths. There were 8 days of public hearing non-stop. And then the captain of ports of Goa tried to bring in 9 jetties. And he actually was shooed out of all the Gram Sabhas that he tried to attend. And the panchayats and villages are firmly against these jetties. And therefore, now the next step that they've tried is the tourism department of Goa has come out with a master plan where the tourism jetty management committee will decide carrying capacity of rivers and, and use central funds to make new jetties across Goa. So that's been strongly opposed, and we are sure we're going to win that one too. Along this path, we have experienced the CZMPs because all our rivers are mostly part of the coastal regulatory zone, and the CZMPs prepared by NCSCM have been completely illegal. And I can't imagine that this NCSCM organization has been allowed to continue its illegalities, because we have submitted clear examples of the fraud that they have done. But the battle was amazing because we went to all our coastal villages along the rivers, and the local fisher folk and communities map all their coastal areas amazingly with all the details, with every kind of fishing activity and fish breeding activity. And it was brilliant, and GIS maps were submitted by all of them. But now we see the final CZMPs show no fishing rights. Now our rivers have got mudflats where we have a local fishing net called Futtauni. I can't remember the English name, but which is parallel to the bank and uses the mud flat, the tidal effect to just catch some fish. The other one is stakes which go across the width of the river called Ario. And these are all having licenses from the Portuguese days. But today the Department of Fisheries is trying to cancel all the licenses. And we can see that in spite of all the evidences, there are no way they want to show any of our fishing activities in the rivers. So these are all various aspects. There's sand mining, which is done, which we believe is another way of doing dredging without the permission of the government, and police give full protection to the miners, then they even shot people dead. These are just various aspects, but just coming back to a fundamental thing, for what is this? This inland waterways are to continue economic killing the planet. We don't need transportation across rivers or even highways or railways. We need self-sufficient, self-governing villages if we want our future generations to see the light of day. I think that's what we are here to share. There's a lot more, but yeah, I think we should end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really interesting presentation, and just kind of your focus on community knowledge and your kind of experience of them being able to map the region, and perhaps much better than kind of technical know-how coming from the outside. I think that's really interesting. So we'll move on to the next presentation. And if I could invite Professor Sunil Chaudhary to start his presentation. So you're on mute right now.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are now. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you India River Forum, जिसने हमें मौका दिया है आप लोगों के साथ इतने महत्वपूर्ण विषय पे एक्सचेंज करने का आइडियाज, आप लोगों को सुनने का मौका मिल रहा है। इनफैक्ट हम लोगों की टीम जो है बिहार में भागलपुर जिले में विक्रमशिला गैंगेटिक डॉल्फिन सैंक्चुरी में पिछले 2 दशकों से काम कर रही है फॉर द कंजर्वेशन ऑफ द रिवर बायोडाइवर्सिटी एंड पर्टिकुलरली फॉर द गैंगेटिक डॉल्फिन्स विच इज रिवर डॉल्फिन। और इसके साथ ही जो लोकल स्टेक होल्डर्स हैं, जो फिशिंग कम्युनिटी है, मेनली रिवर डिपेंडेंट कम्युनिटी फॉर देयर लाइवलीहुड, तो उनके लिए काम करने की और उनके जो इश्यूज एंड चैलेंजेस हैं विक्रमशिला में उसको प्रोजेक्ट करने का काम हम लोग करते रहे हैं। वी हैव कंडक्टेड ए वैरायटी ऑफ एक्टिविटीज। वी हैव आइडेंटिफाइड, हमने आइडेंटिफाई किया है थ्रेट्स, विच आर द प्रेजेंट थ्रेट्स फॉर द एक्वेटिक वाइल्ड लाइफ, नदी के जो हैं गैंगेटिक डॉल्फिन्स के लिए, और what are the cumulative impacts। हाल के दिनों में हम लोगों ने देखा है कि in addition of all other threats, the inland waterways transport is a new emerging threat in Vikramshila Sanctuary. Vikramshila Sanctuary is a protected area. और हम लोगों ने कुछ एक्सपेरिमेंट्स किए थे 2012-13 में, जिसमें क्लियर कट हम लोगों ने एविडेंस देखा था कि बिकॉज ऑफ द ड्रेजिंग एक्टिविटी फॉर मेंटेनेंस ऑफ द चैनल, रिवर चैनल, डॉल्फिन्स मूव्ड डाउन स्ट्रीम। वो अपने प्रेफर्ड हैबिटेट से जो है वो मूव कर गए। देन वी हैड सीन ऑल्सो बिकॉज ऑफ ड्रेजिंग, जो बॉटम सेडिमेंट रिवर का जो ऊपर आ रहा है उसके कारण जो हेवी मेटल्स एंड अदर टॉक्सिक मेटल्स आर कमिंग इनटू द वाटर कॉलम, तो उसमें आर्सेनिक का हम लोगों ने डिटर्मिनेशन किया था, एस्टिमेशन किया था, एंड वी फाउंड आर्सेनिक, द कंसंट्रेशन ऑफ आर्सेनिक इंक्रीज्ड मेनी फोल्ड्स, इवन 100 times. So these are the issues, new emerging threat because of the inland waterways and the traffic. So हम लोगों ने कल के सेशन में डॉक्टर नचकेत ने पर्टिकुलरली विथ रेफरेंस टू विक्रमशिला सैंक्चुरी जो इम्पैक्ट्स हैं, इन्वायरमेंटल इम्पैक्ट्स एंड सोशल इम्पैक्ट्स की अवली ने भी विशेष चर्चा की है। तो आई विल स्टार्ट विथ सम ऑफ द इंसिडेंट्स जो अभी हाल के दिनों में विक्रमशिला में हुए हैं, जिसकी चर्चा नचिकेत ने भी कल के सत्र में की और अवली ने भी की थी। 9 अक्टूबर को इसी साल बिकॉज ऑफ द ड्रेजिंग एक्टिविटी, ये ड्रेजिंग जो है विक्रमशिला के भागलपुर में मुशहरी घाट है, वहाँ का इको सेंसिटिव जोन है, वहाँ पे ये ड्रेजिंग हो रही थी। एंड बिकॉज ऑफ द ड्रेजिंग एक्टिविटी 50 भैंसें वाटर बोफेलोज और 6 चरवाहे जो प्रतिदिन इस पार से फ्रॉम द साउदर्न बैंक विच इज द सिटी साइड, इधर से गंगा के उस पार टुवर्ड्स द नॉर्दर्न साइड जहाँ की दियारा लैंड है, वहाँ पे फॉडर क्रॉप्स हैं, तो वो अपनी भैंसों को चराने के लिए जाते थे। And because of this dredging, 50 water buffaloes, they were injured, might be propeller के कारण, because of the suction force of the dredger, और out of 6, 2 जो है, namely सिकंदर यादव and कारे यादव, they lost their life. और इतनी बड़ी घटना हो गई, इसको डिस्ट्रिक्ट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन ने और इवन द पब्लिक प्रिंट मीडिया और इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीडिया ने भी इसको उजागर बहुत ढंग से नहीं किया। इट वाज वेरी माइनर इंसिडेंट्स ऐसा दिखाया गया। सो वी आस्क्ड टू द वाइल्ड लाइफ वार्डन ऑफ विक्रमशिला सैंक्चुरी कि ये जो हो रहा है ऑपरेशन ड्रेजिंग का, क्या उन्होंने आपसे परमिशन ली है? He said no permission has been asked for the operation of dredgers. ये जो कारे यादव जो कि खत्म हो गए इस इंसिडेंस में, उनकी एक बच्ची है, उनकी वाइफ है, उनकी 14 भैंसें चली गई, उनका लाइवलीहुड का जो सोर्स था वो खत्म हो गया, और जो कंपनसेशन की प्रक्रिया है वो इतनी दुरूह है कि स्टिल दे हैव नॉट गॉट एनी कंपनसेशन एंड इट विल टेक लॉन्ग टाइम। और उसमें भी डिस्ट्रिक्ट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन कह रहा है कि मैक्सिमम 10 भैंस का ही जो है कंपनसेशन मिल सकता है, नॉट मोर देन दैट। सो दिस इज द सिचुएशन। एंड ये इको सेंसिटिव जोन में ड्रेजिंग हो रही थी, तो मेरे मन में कुछ प्रश्न आते हैं एंड आई होप कि आप सब लोग उसका उत्तर खोजने में मेरी मदद करेंगे। तो मेरा है कि क्या ड्रेजिंग एक्टिविटी की कानूनन अनुमति लेने से एग्जम्प्ट कर दिया गया है? अबली के आज के प्रेजेंटेशन में मुझे मेंटेनेंस ड्रेजिंग के लिए जरूरत नहीं है, इसका जो अभी का प्रेजेंट स्टेटस है वो पता चला। इंडियन वाइल्ड लाइफ एक्ट के अनुसार वाइल्ड लाइफ सेंचुरी में किसी भी गतिविधि को, जो डॉल्फिन जो इंडेंजर्ड स्पीसीज है जिसके लिए विक्रमशिला डिक्लेयर किया गया है सेंचुरी, तो ऐसी कोई भी एक्टिविटी जो डॉल्फिन को इंज्योर करती है, उसके हैबिटेट को डिस्टर्ब करती है, दैट इज प्रोहिबिटेड, वो प्रतिबंधित है। तो क्या ड्रेजिंग ऐसी एक्टिविटी नहीं है? क्या ऐसी एक्टिविटी से परे है ड्रेजिंग? दैट इज ए क्वेश्चन बिफोर मी। क्या द सेकंड क्वेश्चन जो आता है हमारे पास, क्या हमारे पास ड्रेजिंग की कोई पॉलिसी है क्या? कि ड्रेजिंग, और जहां तक मैं जानता हूं शायद नहीं, क्या ड्रेजिंग ऑपरेशन के लिए गाइडलाइंस या रेगुलेशन डेवलप किए गए हैं? शायद नहीं। क्या ड्रेजिंग ऑपरेशन के कारण जान माल की सुरक्षा के उपाय किए गए हैं? शायद नहीं। क्या ड्रेजिंग ऑपरेशन से रिवर डिपेंडेंट कम्युनिटी की नष्ट होने वाली आजीविका, लाइवलीहुड को सुटेबली कंपनसेट करने का कोई कानूनी प्रावधान किया गया है? दीज आर द क्वेश्चंस, आई सीक आंसर फॉर दैट। दूसरा जो तथ्य मेरे सामने है, जो मैंने देखा है अपने अनुभव से, कि मोस्टली ड्रेजिंग एक्टिविटी इको सेंसिटिव जोन में, वो किनारे में हो रही है, एंड वेयर वी फाइंड साइड चैनल्स ऑफ द रिवर। दीज साइड चैनल्स आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। साइड चैनल्स में हमें फाइटोप्लैंक्टन मिल रहे हैं, जू प्लैंक्टन मिल रहे हैं, एंड दीज आर द ब्रीडिंग ग्राउंड्स फॉर द फिश ऑल्सो। तो ये जो साइड चैनल्स हैं, दोज आर वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर द सेकेंडरी प्रोडक्टिविटी ऑफ द मेन चैनल। ये मेन चैनल की प्रोडक्टिविटी के लिए इतने इंपॉर्टेंट है बिकॉज ऑफ द ड्रेजिंग। चूंकि ड्रेज्ड मटेरियल भी वो वहीं गिरा रहे हैं 100 फीट आगे, तो पूरा का पूरा साइड चैनल जो है वो हैबिटेट कंप्लीटली जो है सो डिस्टर्ब है, एंड वो बिल्कुल जो है सो डैमेज हो रहा है, डिग्रेड हो रहा है. सो दैट इज वन ऑफ द थ्रेट्स. तो ड्रेजिंग कहाँ हो, ड्रेजिंग कितना हो और ड्रेजिंग कहाँ नहीं हो, शायद इसकी कोई गाइडलाइंस विकसित नहीं हुई है. देन आई लर्न इन विक्रमशिला कि नेशनल वाटरवेज एक में रिवर टूरिज्म को प्रमोट किया जा रहा है. बिहार सरकार कर रही है, ऐसी सारी चीजें हो रही हैं. और हम देख रहे हैं वर्षों से कि जो प्राइवेट टूर ऑपरेटर्स हैं, which are sitting outside, even in UK, they are managing the river tourism in Bihar through the national waterways. And Vikramshila Abhyaranya is in the way. तो ये कलकत्ता से वाराणसी तक रेगुलर जो है ये रिवर क्रूज का ऑपरेशन होता है आफ्टर मानसून, जबकि नदी में पानी होता है, एंड दैट इज फॉर 4 months. तो चूंकि हम विक्रमशिला में काम कर रहे हैं, दिस इज अ प्रोटेक्टेड एरिया. अगेन देयर इज अ क्वेश्चन कि क्या उन्होंने परमिशन मांगी है? दे हैव नॉट आस्क्ड एनी परमिशन. यहां पर गवर्नेंस का भी क्वेश्चन आता है कि वाइल्ड लाइफ वार्डन इज द केयरटेकर ऑफ दिस सैंक्चुरी प्रोटेक्टेड एरिया, whereas principal secretary tourism from Patna, state principal secretary, and the district administration at Bhagalpur both are promoting the river tourism. वो सारा काम ऐसा कर रहे हैं. इवन इनलैंड वाटरवेज के अथॉरिटीज जो यहाँ हैं, वो प्राइवेट टूर ऑपरेटर के बिग वेसल्स को उनका सक्सेसफुल पैसेज कैसे हो, इसके थ्रू वो आगे जाके कहीं अटक न जाएं, जो अटक जाते हैं. तो पायलट जो है सो कि वेसल चलता है इनलैंड वाटरवेज का आगे आगे. और ऐसा जब भी कोई वेसल जाता है, रिवर क्रूज जाता है, तो उस पे टूरिज्म डिपार्टमेंट के ऑफिशियल्स जो है उनका डेपुटेशन होता है कि राइट फ्रॉम बिगनिंग टू एंड टिल वाराणसी वो उसके साथ होते हैं ताकि सक्सेसफुल पैसेज हो सके. तो ये जो रिवर टूरिज्म हो रहा है, रिवर टूरिज्म का जो एक ऑब्जेक्टिव था कि लोकल स्टेक होल्डर्स जो हैं, जो मछुआरे हैं, जो रिवर के किनारे के लोग हैं, जो लोकल क्राफ्ट्स बनाने वाले लोग हैं, शायद इन लोगों को कोई फायदा मिलेगा. लेकिन टिल नाउ वी हैव नॉट सीन, हमने नहीं देखा कि लोकल स्टेक होल्डर्स को या लोकल लोगों को या लोकल क्राफ्ट्स को या लोकल आर्ट एंड कल्चर का प्रमोशन हुआ हो और उसका बेनिफिट जो है सो कि यहाँ के लोगों को मिला हो. ऑल द मेजर शेयर दैट गोज टू द बेनिफिट दैट गोज टू द प्राइवेट टूर ऑपरेटर्स, उसका कोई फायदा नहीं मिल रहा है. तो ये रिवर टूरिज्म के लिए ये क्या कोई प्रोटोकॉल बना है क्या, कोई गाइडलाइंस हैं क्या? क्योंकि विक्रमशिला सैंक्चुरी इज वेरी रिच इन बायोडाइवर्सिटी. यहाँ की जैव विविधता बहुत समृद्ध है. ये केवल डॉल्फिन नहीं है, यहाँ पे गैंगेटिक डॉल्फिन्स, जो और भी टॉप कार्निवोर हैं रिवर के. यहाँ पे ये ऐसा अकेला स्ट्रेच है जहाँ ऊद बिलाव भी मिलता है, ऑटर्स, स्मूथ कोटेड ऑटर्स मिलते हैं, ओकेजनल साइटिंग्स ऑफ द मगर एंड घड़ियाल्स भी है. एंड देन इट इज नॉट ए बर्ड सेंचुरी, लेकिन rich variety, more than 200 birds has been listed in Vikramshila, and that includes so many endangered and threatened species. ये है फिश की स्पीसीज है, टर्टल्स की स्पीसीज है. तो ये जो एक्वेटिक वाइल्ड लाइफ है विच इज ए हेरिटेज ऑफ दिस रीजन, और द गंगा को अगर पोस्टेरिटी में भी देखना है कि गंगा नदी ऐसी हुआ करती थी, तो मेरा मानना है कि यही स्ट्रेच ऐसा है विक्रमशिला का कि यू कैन शो टू द जनरेशंस टू कम कि गंगा नदी ऐसी हुआ करती थी. सो दिस स्ट्रेच हैज टू बी कंजर्व. और हम ऐसा सारा काम कर रहे हैं और इनलैंड वाटरवेज की वजह से तो ये चीजें जो है आज थ्रेटेंड है. सो कोई भी, मैं जहां तक जानता हूं, इवन स्टेट गवर्नमेंट ने अभी तक जो है सो कोई प्रोटोकॉल रिवर टूरिज्म का अभी नहीं बना है, नई गाइडलाइंस बना है. गवर्नेंस का क्वेश्चन मैंने इसलिए उठाया कि वाइल्ड लाइफ वार्डन अगर कोई एक्शन लेता है तो डिस्ट्रिक्ट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन की उसकी नाराजगी होती है, डीएम की, प्रिंसिपल सेक्रेटरी की नाराजगी होती है. रिवर फ्रंट का डेवलपमेंट हो रहा है यहाँ पे, साथ साथ कंक्रीट पूरा जो है सो नदी किनारे बनाया जा रहा है. नो environmental clearance was taken, and when on हम लोगों के इनिशिएटिव पे जब डीएफओ ने, वाइल्ड लाइफ वार्डन ने क्वेश्चन किया तो पूरा बिहार सरकार का एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन उससे नाराज हो गया. तो ये चीजें जो हो रही हैं, कोई कोऑर्डिनेशन बिटवीन द डिपार्टमेंट नहीं है कि ये कैसे होगा. जो साइड चैनल्स हैं, यहाँ पे कोल और ढाब करके दो स्ट्रक्चर बनता है. The side channels which are connected to the main channel permanently throughout the year. और तो इस तरह के जो स्ट्रक्चर्स बनते हैं, इसको फिशिंग लीज भी दिए जा रहे हैं, जबकि एज पर प्रोटेक्टेड जो एरियाज हैं उसमें जो वाइल्ड लाइफ एक्ट कहता है कि ऐसा कोई भी चैनल जो परमानेंटली अटैच्ड है मेन चैनल से, इसको लीज आउट नहीं कर सकते फॉर कमर्शियल पर्पसेस. So there is no coordination between the fishery department and the forest department and the revenue department. तो ये सारी चीजें, इसके कारण ये सारे प्रॉब्लम्स आ रहे हैं. इनलैंड वाटरवेज के जो शिप्स जा रहे हैं, जो वेसल जा रहे हैं, और जो ड्रेजिंग एक्टिविटीज यहाँ विक्रमशिला में हो रही है, तो बरारी इज द प्लेस जहाँ की फिशरमैन का हैमलेट है यहाँ पे लोकल. तो उनकी जो वो दे आर स्मॉल फिशरमैन, ट्रेडिशनल फिशरमैन, प्रोटेक्टेड एरिया होते हुए भी वो मछली मारने का काम जो है सो कर रहे हैं. दैट इज अ रियलिटी. लेकिन अब जो है वो सारी चीजें भी नहीं मिल रही हैं, वो डिस्प्लेस हो रहे हैं. और डिस्प्लेस हो रहे हैं तो कोई मैनेजमेंट की पॉलिसी है उनको जो है सो रिहैबिलिटेट करने की या उनको कंपनसेट करने की, ये मुझे नजर नहीं आता है. तो ये सारी चीजें हैं कि ऐसा कोई गाइडलाइंस जो है सो कि नजर नहीं आ रहा, ऐसा कोई रेगुलेशन नजर नहीं आ रहा है. और अगर है भी तो वो पेपर में है, वो फील्ड में जो है सो ऑपरेशनल कहीं भी नजर नहीं आता है कि उसका रेगुलेशन कैसे हो रहा है और उसका इम्पैक्ट जो है सो कि महसूस हो रहा है. इनलैंड वाटरवेज के एक्ट में जो मुझे जहां तक जानकारी है, जो समय समय पर संशोधन हुए हैं, और अभी जो 21 में जो इंडियन वेसल्स एक्ट आया है, तो पहले जो है स्टेट और सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट दोनों की जिम्मेदारी थी वाटरवेज डेवलपमेंट प्रोजेक्ट्स में. लेकिन अब जो है शायद स्टेट का से जो है नहीं के बराबर रह गया है. जो सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट है उसने ऐसे सारे करामात किए हैं, ऐसे सारे चीजें की हैं कि वो उसका रेगुलेटरी जो पावर्स है वो सब का सब सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट में समाहित हो गया है. तो इंडियन वाटरवेज ट्रांसपोर्ट के संदर्भ में हम देख रहे हैं कि इन्वायरमेंटल कंप्लायंस के लिए कोई साउंड गाइडलाइंस और पॉलिसी जो है वो डेवलप नहीं हो पाई है. अतः जरूरत है कि वाटरवेज डेवलपमेंट प्रोजेक्ट्स के लिए ऐसे गाइडलाइंस डेवलप करने की जिसमें इन्वायरमेंटल प्रोटेक्शन रिक्वायरमेंट्स की सही शर्तें समाहित हों, इंक्लूडेड हों. वाटरवेज एवं रिवर सर्विसेज के लिए प्रॉपर रेगुलेशन हो. अभी मैं अपने पूर्व के वक्ता भारत झुनझुनवाला जी को सुन रहा था, एंड आई टोटली एग्री कि ये जो नेशनल वाटरवेज 1 है ये वाइबल नहीं होगा. वाइबल क्यों नहीं होगा? क्योंकि अभी भी हम देख रहे हैं कि केवल 4 महीने के लिए ही ये जो है ऑपरेशन है. और आप देखेंगे इस वाटरवेज में जो है एनटीपीसी फरक्का से लेके एनटीपीसी कहलगांव, एनटीपीसी बाढ़, इस तरह से ये रिवर के किनारे हैं और सब थर्मल पावर है. कोल ट्रांसपोर्ट जो है सो विजुअलाइज किया गया था, ये जाएगा. और ये जब जाता है तो बाढ़ इज अ प्लेस इन बिटवीन भागलपुर एंड मुंगेर एंड पटना. तो वहां जाते जाते जो बिग वेसल्स हैं ये सब के सब अटक जाते हैं. नेविगेबल चैनल है नहीं, प्रॉपर डेप्थ नहीं है, प्रॉपर विड्थ नहीं है, तो वो लीन सीजन में जा ही नहीं पाते. और ऐसा पहले हो चुका है कि वहां स्टक कर गए और फिर सबों को डीलोडिंग किया गया और फिर रोडवेज से जो है डेस्टिनेशन पे भेजा गया. तो जब कॉस्ट का हम एस्टिमेशन करते हैं कि पर किलोमीटर टनेज जो है वो वाटरवेज से वो इको फ्रेंडली है, इकोनॉमिकल है, वी नेवर इंक्लूड द कॉस्ट ऑफ ड्रेजिंग. मेंटेनेंस चैनल के लिए जो कॉस्ट इन्वॉल्व है उसको भी उसमें जोड़ो, अदर कॉस्ट उसमें जोड़ो, जो पोल्यूशन हो रहा है उसका भी जो है सो कॉस्ट जोड़ो, उसके रिमेडिएशन के लिए जो मेजर्स लिए जाएंगे, जो डिस्पोजल ऑफ द ड्रेस्ड मटेरियल होगा उसके लिए जो मैकेनिज्म डेवलप की जाएगी उसका कॉस्ट जोड़ो. और तब देखो कि वाटरवेज जो है सो कि वो इकोनॉमिकली वो whether it is cheaper than the roadways and railways or not. तो ये जो है आई एग्री कि वो वाइबल नहीं होगा, लेकिन मेरा ये भी मानना है कि सरकार जो चाह रही है वो कर रही है. दे आर मैनेजिंग इवन द EIA असेसमेंट को भी जो है सो वो भी अपने अनुसार जो है मैनेज कर लेती है. पब्लिक कंसल्टेशन जो है वो भी जो है सो फॉर्मेलिटी पेपर पे हो जाती है किसी भी चीज के लिए. आप देख सकते हो जो रामनगर में जो टर्टल सैंक्चुरी थी उसका EIA मुझे देखने का मौका मिला था, मेरे पास भेजा गया था. एंड आई कुड सी कि जिस किसी ने भी किया था कैसे किया था, बेस्ड अपॉन द प्रीवियस रिपोर्ट्स दे हैड नेवर विजिटेड द प्लेस, और वो हो गया, उन्होंने क्लियरेंस दे दिया कि इसका डी नोटिफिकेशन किया जा सकता है, और बाद में डी नोटिफाई किया गया, और कल के सत्र में आपने देखा कि 17 किलोमीटर शिफ्ट भी कर दिया गया आगे. तो ये सारी चीजें जो है सो की हो रही हैं. तो हम लोग इतने डिस्कशंस कर रहे हैं हर फोरम पे, सारे सिग्नल्स आ रहे हैं, इसके बाद भी ग्राउंड रियलिटी ये है कि इंडियन वाटरवेज जो है वो डेवलप होगा. अब बिहार में गंडक में विच हैज बीन डिक्लेयर्ड एज नेशनल वाटरवेज नंबर 37, गंडक जो है नेपाल से आती है, बिहार में एंटर करती है, और बिहार में पटना के पास, हाजीपुर के पास जाके गंगा में विलीन हो जाती है, वो मर्ज कर जाती है. तो यहाँ पे किस तरह के, दैट इज अ रेगुलेटेड रिवर, वहां बराज है, वहां पे इंडो नेपाल बॉर्डर पे रेगुलेटेड रिवर में इतना पानी नहीं होता लीन सीजन में, ब्रेडेड चैनल्स हैं. तो आप कहाँ ले जाओगे वाटरवेज, किसके लिए, पैसेंजर्स के लिए, कार्गो के लिए, किसके लिए करना चाहते हो? दैट इज नॉट रिक्वायर्ड फॉर गंडक. जहां रिक्वायर्ड है वहां आप डेवलप करो. इट शुड नॉट बी फॉर ऑल दी जो वाटरवेज आपने डेवलप किए हैं उसके लिए कर रहे हो. तो लेकिन फिर भी मेरा मानना है, यू में एग्री और यू में डिसएग्री. भारत झुनझुनवाला जी ने कहा कि ये जो गवर्नेंस ऑफ इंडियन वाटरवेज है, इसकी टाइटल को लेके उन्होंने क्वेश्चन उठाया कि इट मीन्स वी हैव एक्सेप्टेड वाटरवेज. बट ग्राउंड रियलिटीज यही है कि हमें एक्सेप्ट करना पड़ेगा, जो मैं देख रहा हूँ. और आई कंपेयर दिस सिचुएशन विथ ए फिजियोलॉजिकल एक्टिविटी ऑफ द प्लांट्स. प्लांट्स में एक फिजियोलॉजिकल एक्टिविटी होती है ट्रांसपिरेशन, जिसमें वो वाटर को जो है वो दे लूज द वाटर, वो उत्सर्जित करते हैं वाटर इन द फॉर्म ऑफ वाटर वेपर, वेदर वाटर इज अवेलेबल और नॉट फॉर द एब्जॉर्प्शन. लेकिन ट्रांसपिरेशन की प्रक्रिया प्लांट में चलती रहती है. तो ये सिचुएशन है. तो ट्रांसपिरेशन हैज बीन टर्म्ड एज द नेसेसरी इविल फॉर द प्लांट्स. प्लांट्स के लिए नेसेसरी इविल जो है सो, तो दिस इंडियन वाटरवेज इज अ रियलिटी. इट इज अ नेसेसरी इविल फॉर अस, फॉर द हेल्थ ऑफ द रिवर. तो आखिर हम कर क्या सकते हैं? हम यही कर सकते हैं कि प्रॉपर गाइडलाइंस, रेगुलेशंस और लीगल फ्रेमवर्क बना करके वी कैन कंट्रोल, वी कैन रेगुलेट सम ऑफ द थिंग्स की इसकी इम्पैक्ट्स जो है मिनिमाइज हों. तो वो जरूरत है उसकी. ऑल स्टेक होल्डर्स शुड ज्वाइन हैंड्स इस दिशा में आगे बढ़ने की. और मैं मानता हूं कि जो हमारी पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप है और जो पॉलिसी मेकर्स हैं, उनके भी कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग की जरूरत है, क्योंकि उनके पास वाटर एक्सपर्टीज है ही नहीं. एंड फॉर दिस सिचुएशन they are also responsible. So that is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Chaudhary. This is really a very, very, very illuminating presentation, and it touched on so many various aspects. And of particular interest to me was what you talked about, the lack of institutional coordination, sir, and how across the government, whether it's at the center or at the state level, there is perhaps conscious confusion has been created on who has jurisdiction on what issue. And if someone does exercise the jurisdiction, how difficult it's made for that person. So now I think we'll open up the discussion, and we see there are several questions already in the chat box. And I did see one hand up, but maybe we'll start with the discussion. Siddharth, can we have everyone on the screen now?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if we can,
if that's okay,
ask all speakers to switch on their videos.
Yeah. And I'll also request some of the, I have some of the attendees on the list in front of me, if I could request them to kind of switch on their mic, and Siddharth maybe can enable that. Mr. Himanshu Thakkar, I see you have several questions and specific questions, and some I think have been answered. If I could request you to switch on your mic and maybe make a few interventions.
No, actually, I have already asked the questions. So I would suggest that, those questions, if they can be answered, that will be good enough. I don't need to say anything more.
So I maybe then I'll just read out the questions. If, okay, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so Mr. Thakkar's question to Mr. Abhijit was, what is the status of the waterways of Goa right now? Abhijit, if you want to just quickly take that, and then we'll move on to the next question. What is the state?
Okay. Yeah, the waterways are on paper. Possession is with, of course, the local communities. Now they have done DPRs for, I think, 3 or 4 of our rivers. For the detailed project reports have been prepared, but the dredging EIA study is not done. They are not proceeded with the dredging part of it. So they have then moved on to actually constructing jetties. So that also, the first attempt by Capital Force has been blocked by the local villagers. And now the tourism department has tried to again make a jetty policy where they can build jetties, which has been strongly opposed. So on ground, nothing has happened except, I think, because of sand mining and things like that. There is continued, destruction of the fisheries, benthic communities, and the bunds, etc., which collapse. But the fight is on, and the government is, I think, treading softly, because there is enough momentum for people to take them on, enough numbers, hopefully. So yeah, we are waiting. We know that they will push at any time, and so we are vigilant. And also people are organizing themselves. The government, the political leadership, they are trying to do their bit of breaking down movements and whatever, the unity of local government. So that's ongoing struggle, but otherwise nothing on ground.
Thank you, Abhijit. Avli, there's a question for you by Dipanjana. So she's asking whether you've also studied the time period taken for one environment clearance case in such application, and about post-project, post-EC compliance report, if there is any, and what is the monitoring process being followed for ensuring environmental compliance for maintenance dredging in other countries with good river management practices.
Wow, a lot of important questions. Thank you, Dipanjana, for posing these. I think what I forgot to mention in my presentation is that because of the several sort of interventions made to circumvent the environment clearance process itself, the projects which had earlier applied for environment clearance, which are the Waterways of Goa, National Waterway 4 and National Waterway 5 also, I think no progress has been made till now on building on those TORs which were given by the ministry. The EIA reports which are prepared and which are there in the public domain with regards to inland waterways, we have only seen sort of EIAs which are prepared for Inland Waterways Authority of India, which are mainly to fulfill the guidelines of the World Bank. So these are not independent sort of studies or done in a peer-reviewed sort of manner, which is followed when the environment clearance process is followed. So again, like these are sort of EIA exercises which are done just to fulfill the World Bank conditions. So far we have not seen any of the actually EC sort of process being gone ahead. And all the projects which had applied earlier, even now they are quoting this maintenance dredging aspect, they're all saying that we are also doing maintenance dredging, so we don't need to actually go through the EC process. So that's something which is an implication of this office memorandum, which was passed by the Ministry of Environment in December 2017. And I think, yeah, so there's no question of post-monitoring, except the terminal in Haldia, which is constructed, that has applied for EC and CRZ, but only because it comes under the CRZ provisions. So that has gotten the CRZ, and unfortunately, even there, what we are seeing is that in terms of post-monitoring, in terms of conditions which are given by the ministry, the reports which are submitted in those sort of compliance reports, those are also not really new sort of studies which are done. In so many of the cases, we are seeing prior studies which are done, and then they're replicated in the compliance reports. So yeah, I think that answers most of the questions. The last question is very tricky. I will not go there. Maybe we can have that conversation later. Yeah, thank you.
Lovely. Dr. Chaudhary, we have several questions for you, and I'll just put them all together so you can take them one by one. So what are the legal and other steps that have been taken to challenge the dredging operations being done in Vikramshila, and also what legal steps can be taken for the use of the sanctuary areas by barges and cruises passing through? Is there a riverfront development that's also happening in the sanctuary area? Can this be legally challenged? Can fish leases be challenged as well? And Mr. Thakkar is also asking what steps Bihar government is taking about the illegal activities that are happening within the sanctuary. Will it help to write to people in Bihar government? And there's also another question for you from Dr. Jagdish Krishnaswamy. Does the state government and local people represented not have an opinion on this that could help counter the narrative coming from the center? So several questions for you, sir, but I'm hoping you can take them. So you're on mute.
Thank you, Avni. विक्रमशिला सैंक्चुरी में जो लीगल चैलेंज है अगेंस्ट दीज ऑपरेशन ऑफ द इनलैंड वाटरवेज एंड अदर्स, तो ऐसे किसी फोरम से जो है सो कोई चैलेंज किसी कोर्ट में अभी तक हुआ नहीं है. दिस इज द करंट स्टेटस. ओपिनियंस लोगों ने व्यक्त किए हैं, प्रोटेस्ट किया है. फिशिंग कम्युनिटी जो है इधर, दे हैव ए ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जल श्रमिक संघ, सो दे हैव आल्सो, उनकी लाइवलीहुड जा रही है, तो दे हैव प्रोटेस्टेड, दे हैव मेड डेमोन्स्ट्रेशन बिफोर द डिस्ट्रिक्ट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन against the operation of the inland waterways and its impact on the fishery and their livelihood. वो चीजें हुई हैं. State government, after our long persuasion, and the other activists in the sanctuary area or in Bihar, they have raised this question. So the recently Forest Department, Forest and Environment Department of Bihar government has become conscious, and they are taking some of the steps to stop the illegal activities that is going on in the sanctuary area. That is a 65-kilometer stretch from Sultanganj to Kahalgaon. But what happens, this forest department itself has no proper manpower. And there is no dedicated force for the sanctuary, maintenance of the sanctuary or for the regulation of the sanctuary. In addition of doing all other activities, social forestry and all other programs of the forest department, they are doing the additional job for the, so the regulation or the monitoring becomes very, very difficult in VGDS. So to declare a wildlife sanctuary, it is very easy, but for its regulation of the Wildlife Act, regulation of the Fisheries Act, they need manpower or force which is not available at the moment. They have even not the real resources in terms of the motor boats and other, so they can move from in 65-kilometer stretch if there is any incidents happens there. So this is the status, but the good thing is that the state government has shown consciousness. They are more concerned. They are taking initiative. They need more time and resources for protecting or for the Vikramshila sanctuary. As far as the concern of the river tourism and other things, we have raised this to the state government, and recently they have made a committee for the Vikramshila sanctuary, and they have a term of reference that the committee should form the regulations for the river tourism. This is the latest development. But as far as inland waterways, transport, movement of the traffic, movement of the vessels, they have no respect for the regulations of the wildlife sanctuary, and it appears that they are not willing to ask any permission from the authorities.
Right. Sir, I think there's a follow-up. I mean, I assume that there's a question about whether there was an approval taken from from the NMCG. Has there been any approval for dredging in the sanctuary area, to the best of your knowledge?
No.
Nothing has been taken.
Nothing. NMCG has Ganga Praharis. They are doing only awareness program and education program, but the real issues and challenges which are in Vikramshila, that is not being taken up by the NMCG.
So we have few questions which aren't for specific panelists. So I will use my moderator rights and request Bharat sir to respond to a few of these, if that's okay. So there's a question with regard to Inland Vessels Act 2021 and why that was passed. And the question was without debate by panelists. Perhaps the question was without much debate in Parliament. So if you have any thoughts on that, if any of the other panelists would like to take that question, Avli, maybe you would like. And the second question is, what actions can be taken against illegal fishing activities that are being carried out in the Ganga? How can it be controlled?
Okay, on the first question, I'll skip it for Avli because I really have not studied it on the Vessels Act. On the second question, you see, my experience is two things. First of all, the only relief I have been able to secure has been from the courts. So it's good to talk to government, but the commercial interests are so overpowering at the government level that other than face-saving some measures, nothing will come out. The government authorities, ministers, previously, at least till the Congress regime, the ministers used to have some say. अब तो कोई मंत्री है ही नहीं. There is only 4-5 जो PMO के अधिकारी हैं, वही देश को चलाते हैं और मोदी जी उनका फेस है. That's all. And आप कुछ भी कर लो, if you raise fundamental issues, you will not make any progress with the bureaucracy. So my approach very clearly, whether it's illegal fishing or whatever, aim for the big. आप फिशिंग लीगलिटी को मत चेंज करो, आप फिशिंग को ही बंद करने की बात करो और गो टू द कोर्ट, गो टू द हाई कोर्ट एंड डोंट गो, आई मीन एनजीटी को जाना, हाई कोर्ट को जाना, सुप्रीम कोर्ट, दैट्स अ टेक्निकल इशू. लेकिन मेरा अपना झुकाव हाई कोर्ट और सुप्रीम कोर्ट की तरफ है. और आप ask for closure of fishing, then you may get regulation. It's like जो लेनिन ने कहा था, bend the stick backwards. अगर आपको टेढ़ी लकड़ी को सीधा करना है तो आपको दूसरी तरफ उसको झुकाओ, तब वो सीधी होगी. So that is how I would say कि we should not get into spend our energies on enforcement of laws and minor issues. उसमें हमारी एनर्जी खत्म हो जाती है. We should aim at the hard measure, और उसका fallout में small measures मिल जाते हैं. That is what I approach. My approach seems to be. I hope I have answered the question.
Thank you. Avli, did you want to respond to the question on Inland Vessels Act 2021?
Yeah, but I think I have also not studied the Inland Vessels bill or act. I've not seen the act so far. But in terms of objections, I think the objections were filed by the National Fish Workers Forum, but I'm not sure if other objections were filed or not.
Right. Any other panelists want to take that? If not, then we'll move on. Okay. Mr. Dilip Jha, did you have your hand up? Oh, I don't know if he's still with us now. Maybe not. We have. Okay. Anyone else? I think that's about it then. Am I missing any other questions? Any other final remarks from the panelists? Yes, Bharat, please.
I would encourage us, both the participants and the panelists. You see, let us not paint the government black and say that they are all evil. The driving force of the government right now is big businessmen and economic development. Let's give the devil its due. And we need to show that how these activities are uneconomic. Maybe because I'm an economist by training, therefore I'm thinking it. But from the larger perspective, what I find is that we are more on the firefighting level. कि इससे ये नुकसान हो जाएगा, fish मर जाएगी, biodiversity मर जाएगी. They don't cut ice with the government. What we need to work more is on economics. We need a group to work on environmental economics, a support group on environmental economics, where we bring in the economic assessment of the various projects that we have discussed here. I think that will help us get some result, but I don't know. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think we'll bring today's session to a close. We're sorry to have not, Mr. Sharan could not join us for certain reasons, but it would have been really good to get his perspective from having been in the government, and particularly from a state which has raised concerns about the inland waterways. But I think this has been a really, really kind of thought-provoking discussion. All our panelists, thank you so much for keeping to time. We're really closing the session also on time, which is always such a challenge, but thank you. Thanks a lot. And sorry, but it's
and thanks to Shivani.
No, not at all. No, I think so many, I mean, Bharat sir raised the issue of economics, but I think throughout the presentation, several kind of key points that came out were just in terms of quality of assessment, quality of kind of understanding what the impacts are, understanding why policies are being made, why are decisions being taken and on what basis. But also, as Professor Chaudhary kind of remarked about, are the necessary regulatory approvals being taken? Are there necessary policies governing certain areas such as tourism, dredging? And so, there's so many areas for all of us to kind of think on, work on going forward. So I really thank the organizers for putting together this session and putting together such a wonderful group of panelists who could speak to this with so much of their rich experience. Thank you so much. Siddharth, shall I?
One thing.
Please.
Organizer. Yes, that's all I want to say. Thank you, the organizers. Okay.
Siddharth, over to you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you all panelists. Thank you, Shubhani, for conducting this session so well. I'm just going to make a quick announcement before people start leaving. I'm just going to share this poster that this was session 4 for India Rivers Week 2022. We're closing the session 4 now, but we have our final session for India Rivers Week 2022 starting at 2 p.m. today. We'd really like you to join session 5, which is the final session at 2 p.m. This link will stay live. You can go have your lunch, have coffee, tea, and come back at 2 p.m. because we'll also be announcing the winners of the Bhagirath Prayas Samman and the Anupam Mishra medal at 2 p.m. So, and we have a very interesting set of speakers for the final session as well. Thinking about, taking in inputs from whatever's happened since yesterday and today morning, and also talking about the idea of what would it mean to have an alternative vision for waterways in India? Like, we've talked about so much that's going wrong. If we had to have waterways, that's the first question. What would it look like, and how could it be more inclusive? What would the legal framework? How would people be included? So requesting you all to join us back at 2 p.m. This link will stay live. You can join the same link again at 2 p.m. as well. So that's the announcement from the organization's end, and we'll see you at 2 p.m. Thank you all, panelists and Shubhani.